I want you to get this picture in your mind. A group of pastors are meeting with the mayor of their city. The mayor's name is Bob Fry. He's the mayor of Arvada, Colorado, which is really a suburb of Denver. These pastors asked Mayor Fry this question: how can we as churches best work together to serve the city? Now here was his answer. The majority of the issues that our city is facing would be eliminated or drastically reduced if we could just figure out a way to become a community of great neighbors. It must have been quite a moment when, after the mayor left, one of the pastors blurted out to the others, "Am I the only one here who is a little embarrassed? I mean, here we are asking the mayor how we can best serve the city, and he basically tells us that it would be great if we could just get our people to obey the second half of the great commandment, which is this: love your neighbor as yourself." Now, from that meeting, a few of those pastors created a growing conversation around what it means to practice loving your neighbor. Out of that conversation, they wrote a book entitled The Art of Neighboring. Now, this same conversation is what we want to start with you, and together we hope we can create a growing conversation in your Bathos small groups about what it means to love our neighbor. I'm Scott Latham. I'm on the staff here at Wesley, and I'm presenting to you in this first talk the guiding theme for this semester in your Bathos small groups, which is this: the mercy and justice issues, which we should engage in various ways, and we're going to talk about that over the semester. And all of this is really an expression of really learning how to love your neighbor. Now, loving our neighbor comes from Luke chapter 10, starting with verse 25. You know it probably as the story of the Good Samaritan. I'm going to read just part of it to you. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "And how do you read it?" This was Jesus speaking. "In the law," you answered, "love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You answered correctly," Jesus said. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Notice in the story that the lawyer isn't satisfied with Jesus' answer, so he goes on to ask, "Who is my neighbor?" But I want you to know something. Notice Jesus, now instead of, I didn't read it to you, but if the small group leader wants to read the story or you want to tell it, the story of the Good Samaritan, what you'll notice is that Jesus doesn't answer the question. Instead, what he does is he changes the question by telling the story of the Good Samaritan. He invites the lawyer to look at who he might be in the story, and that recalibrates the question from "who is my neighbor?" to "am I being neighborly?" Instead of letting the question be about those out there who fit the criteria of being my neighbor, Jesus changes the question to probe our own character and our own soul. Am I being neighborly to those around me? And that's really the question that Jesus is still asking those who want to follow him. Are you being neighborly? So as we take a look at mercy and justice dilemmas in our world for this semester, let me offer you some questions to discuss with each other in this first Bathos small group. And there will be others all through the semester that will offer other questions as well. There's 4 questions I want to ask you, and I want to encourage you to create more than just these 4. Be creative in your group. Here's the first one. Who are you most like in Jesus' story of the Good Samaritan? And that means that in your small group you're going to need to read the story or retell it. Think about all the characters and who you might most be like in this time of your life. That's number 1. Number 2, what does the story tell us about how to be neighborly to someone? Now take some time to name and discuss as many elements of neighborliness as you can. Number 3, how might the practice of the art of neighboring really flow from our loving God? In other words, what might be some connections between loving God and loving others as our neighbor? And then number 4, to whom might God be wanting you to be neighborly, and how might God be wanting you to go about it? In other words, who is your neighbor, really? And what are some ways you can up your game of loving your neighbor right now? Now, I hope these questions and others that you might create for your small group help you begin thinking about and engaging some of the mercy and justice issues of our time. If you want to pursue more information on loving your neighbor, I can recommend this book. It's The Art of Neighboring, which I mentioned a while ago, by J. Pathak and Dave Runyon. Now, even though I haven't read the book myself, on Amazon it has 148 reviews with a 4.6 out of 5 star rating. Now, I would hope that means at least the book is provocative, if not a good one. Also, don't let it escape you that part of being a good neighbor might mean inviting others who have no community to your small group. Okay, my time is up. May God bless you and your meetings.